I went to the blaze box by Chopu Station first thing in the morning to meet with Uozumi as asked.
おう、おはようレイジ。
のんきに挨拶してるんじゃねえよ。田村優作が帰ってきたって。
田村家は監視してるから焦る必要はねえよ。また出ていきそうな時は任意同行を求めることになっている。
Sure hoped it was as simple as he made it sound.
裏口から逃げられるなんて間抜けなことはするなよ。
当たり前だ。今佐藤が向こうに行ってる。
Well, in all honestly, that actually did make me feel better.
事情はもう聞いたのか？
いや、まだだ。帰ってきたのが昨晩遅くだったようだからな。
Uozumi slipped into the passenger seat of my car.
ってお前はパトカーで行けよ。
何台も連なっていくと邪魔じゃねえか。
お前の図体が運転する俺には邪魔なんだよ。
少しの辛抱だ。我慢しろ。
Bastard. I managed to make it to the Tamura residence safe and sound, despite the slight dip on the passenger side the whole way over.
仕事はしているみてえだな。
I saw Ayame emerging from an obsidian black skyline parked within surveillance distance of the Tamura's front yard.
もう少し目立たない車はなかったのか。
I practically screamed, "Hey, the fuzz have their eyes on you."
軽トラなんざ署に置いてねえよ。
Ayame scampered over to Uozumi once he got out of the car.
おはようございます。魚住警部、時坂先生。
お、やっこさんはどうだ？
今日はまだ外出していないようです。
Ayame shook her
君
head.
は彼と話をしたのかい？
いいえ、所轄署の方が一度話を伺ったそうですが。
That's what everyone else has been saying. But is it really the truth?
行くか。
I made my way toward the house after Uozumi gave me a hearty smack on the back. Ding dong. We rang the doorbell and waited a little until the front door slowly slid open, revealing Haru Tamura.
警察の方かい。
You know
お
it.
はようございます、田村さん。優作さんはいらっしゃいますか？
部屋にいるよ。呼んでくれば
I
いい
mean,
のかい？
if you wouldn't mind.
それは後ほどで構いません。
I stopped Haru just as she was turning around.
なんだ
帰ってこられた優作さんとお話はしましたか？
いや、そのまま部屋にこもっちまったよ。
Haru's eyes shifted upward ever so slightly.
本人から聞いた方が早そうだ。
Uozumi whispered in my ear.
あと一つ。優作さんは今回のように外出するのはよくあることなのですか？
いや、何日も帰ってこないなんてのは初めてだね。
そうですか。ありがとうございます。優作さんを呼んでいただけますか？
待ってな。
Haru went back into the house.
今までは夜自宅にいたってことか。
母親の言葉通りなら犯人ではないのだろうな。
だが、ウドの穴で仏が見つかった時、こいつはすでに家を出ていたじゃねえか。
それ以前の事件は起こさないだろう。と来たか。
Made out a silhouette through the door's blurred glass.
どうも。
Hey, buddy. The ashen-faced Yusuke appeared before us.
おはようございます、優作さん。少々話を伺いたいのですが。
Though I didn't let it show on my face, deep down I was tad relieved to see he'd responded to our summons.
はい。
Yusuke feebly nodded. He kept glancing back at Uozumi every few seconds. Not that I blamed him, of course. Anyone would feel intimidated when faced with that guy's scary-ass mug. Looks like we won't need the whole good cop, bad cop approach then.
それ、優作さん、メイゴさんを探していたとのこと。
Crestfallen Yusuke shook his head.
この近所を探していたのですか？
この辺りには警察の捜査員が多くいるはずだぞ。なんでそいつらに見つからなかったんだ？
Uozumi let his impatience get the better of him and pressed Yusuke.
それはできるだけ近づかなかったから
ああ？なんだってこそこそ逃げ回ってるんだ？
やめろ、大隅。
I wasn't sure he was deliberately hamming up his attitude. I eased Uozumi before he made this guy shit his pants.
ですが、確かに彼の言う通り、あなたが警察から身を隠す必要を。
それは探すのを邪魔されたくなかったから。
That made sense. Plus, if he was the culprit, it didn't seem likely he would have come back here once he'd successfully hidden from them. Unless that was exactly what he wanted us to think, of
ああ、
course.
そうだ。あなたが家を出ている間に、ハルさんにお願いしてあなたの部屋を見せてもらったんですが。
Yusuke shook his head.
それは失礼しました。 そこでとある絵を見つけました。
Yusuke bit his
あれ
lip.
はもう一人の妹。
Yusuke's admission was so quiet that I barely heard it. Though I confirmed as much myself, I wanted to see if he'd give us the same
彼
answer.
女が失踪した時のことを教えてもらえますか。
あれは確か新聞を見て絵のことが載っていて、すぐに空は自分の絵だと気づいて、
Yusuke began recounting the story in a hushed voice.
気づいたら空は一人で家を出て行ってました。多分静かなところに行ったんだと思います。
あなたがそう思ったのはなぜですか。あの絵は間宮心臓の遺作と発表されていましたが。
それはもともとの絵は空自身が描いたものだからです。それを知っているのも
Yusuke hung his head.
おいレイジ、今回の件とは関係
Ozumi whispered that as he poked me in the back.
ないわけでもないさ。今回の件の最初。
Or more specifically, the fallen angel depicted in that portrait. Not Sora Tamara herself. Were it the latter, then I would have suspected Yusuke. But if he had an obsession, it was with Sora, not Exile of Paradise.
そういやお前さん、ここ数日は近くの教会に寝泊まりしていたらしいな。
Ozumi abruptly changed the topic, perhaps tired of skirting around that question for so long.
はい。家に戻ると今みたいに警察が来ると思って。
Clearly intimidated Yusuke yielded to Ozumi's glare. So that's when Masaki turned up yesterday, huh? I had yet to hear all those details, so I decided to just let Ozumi handle this part.
俺らだってな、犯人だけじゃなくメイゴさんの行方も追ってるんだ。
すみません。神父様がそうした方がいいとおっしゃったんで。
Yusuke hung his head.
たく、教会でそう言われたのか。
懺悔をした時に警察と関わったら。
Well, he definitely hadn't been wrong about that, given the circumstances. Still, that sure was unusual advice for a priest to give a confession.
止まってるやつの氏素性は問わないみてえだからな。
そっちに真犯人がいるかもしれないってこと。
可能性としてはな。ただ監禁できる場所が周囲にはないようだから難しいと思うが、そうだ、怪しいと思ったやつや場所はなかったか。
Ozumi turned back to Yusuke with that question.
見つかりませんでした。
If he hadn't turned up anything after searching for days on end, then either he was looking in the wrong place or the girls were being kept somewhere in someone's basement or the like. If that were the latter scenario, then that'd make the investigation hell. First things first, it's probably safe to rule out anyone living in tenement houses. The culprit would have been someone with their own house who could abduct a girl without arousing suspicion, such as a hermit. But even if we did manage to narrow down to a reasonably sized list of suspects, the courts would probably never issue a search warrant without incriminating evidence. And so the investigation would be hell. Yusuke fit the criteria, but I doubted it was him, seeing how he lived with his mother and all. Unless she was in on this too, of course, though I had no way of knowing what the odds of that were.
優作さん、メイゴさんをさらったのはどんな人物か。
そんなことは。
Yusuke shook his head.
お前さんみてえのが他にいるんじゃねえかってことだよ。
Yusuke gasped.
大住、
Stopped him from taking it any further, but honestly, I've been thinking the same thing.
そりゃ僕には前科があります。でも血のつながった面をどうこうしたりなんて。それに神父様に諭されて目を覚めたんです。
A priest again, huh? The fact that he was letting homeless people crash at his place was making him sound fishier by the minute. Then again, maybe he really was just a pure soul doing what he believed was his duty as the servant of God. Either way, I was agreeing more and more with Ozumi that we needed to do some digging on this guy.
ま、これ以上疑われたくなかったら外をフラフラするな。メイゴさんはこちらでしっかりと見つけ出すからよ。
よろしくお願いします。
Ozumi and I headed back to the car after Yusuke bowed to us.
どう思う？
Ozumi posed that question as he retrieved a cigarette. I don't think so.
犯人であるという感じはなかったな。
Presented my lighter to Ozumi as I responded.
だがまだ油断はできねえ。監視をつけておく
Keep
し、
an eye on him, sure.
今まで通り調べも進める。
I don't think it's him. I just don't think it.
まあ、その方がいいだろうな。
I knew it was too dangerous to rely on my gut alone. It was then that Ayame showed her face again.
お疲れ様です。付近に異常はありませんでした。
Good work.
おうご苦労さん。じゃああとは所轄に任せて一旦戻るか。レジ、お前も何か考えることがあるんだろう？
ああ、そうだな。いろいろ分かってきたから。
Felt like I was finally starting to get the bigger picture of this case. It was with that thought in mind that I got back in the car and stubbed my cigarette out in the ashtray. I returned to CID Section 1.
さて。
Perched atop the visitor's sofa and took the files piled up on the table. Now, where to begin?
お茶飲まれますか？
まあ、頼もうかな。魚住は？
警部でしたら先ほど刑事部長に連れて行かれました。現場に出てばかりなので戻るとすぐ会議が入ると愚痴を言ってました。
Alas, such was the price of climbing up the ladder. I almost sauntered off to get tea, leaving me alone with the files. First, a corpse remodeled into a fallen angel from exile of Paradise was found on the 15th, correct? And exactly 1 week later, on the 22nd, a decomposed body was discovered in an underground spikenard greenhouse. Both of the victims were little girls. That, plus the fact that the bodies were found in the same relative area, lead us to believe the same culprit was responsible for both. Now, was that assumption correct? It was, yes. I could only imagine it was. Though that said, the theory was pure speculation backed not by any hard evidence, but mere similarities. Such as how both victims were estimated to have died half a year ago, or how the second body had been found just a week after the first. Were it in the work of separate individuals, the second killer wouldn't dare be so bold as to risk disposing of a body. Then again, the same could be said if it was just a single culprit too. But for now, I believed it was safe to stick with that theory. Thus, the next topic on my agenda was figuring out who the culprit was. The most suspicious person on my list right now was... Yeah. It was Kaede. This whole time, she's been right under our noses now. Because he's the one who gave... He was the guy who gave the testimony that we think is BS, right? How he said he saw someone out in the fields, right? Akiyuki Naruko, huh? It was supposedly a victim in all this, what with his daughter missing and all. There's something that cast that into doubt. And that would be his eyewitness testimony. Right. His testimony about witnessing a man who appeared to be the culprit near the spikenard pit. He'd probably said that in the hopes of throwing off the investigation. Now, it may have been too rash to cast him as the culprit based on that alone. We had to at least look into it.
お待たせしました。
It was then that Ayame returned with the tea.
何か思いつきましたか？
まあ、なんとなくね。
I took the teacup she handed me and blew on it before helping myself to a sip.
ここからはちょっと面倒かもしれないが、協力してくれるかな。
ええ、当然です。
さすがにもうあんな無茶はさせられないよ。
I lost track of how many times I'd visited the spikenard field over the past few days. But whatever the answer, it was still surrounded by squad cars like it had been the first time.
今日は何をするつもりですか？
Masuki asked as he took stock of the vicinity.
目撃情報の裏取りだよ。
ここで男を見たのは鳴子さんだったそうです。
ああ、単なる偶然かと思ったんだが。
The car stopped at the footpath and opened its doors, revealing Akiki Naruko and Uozumi.
わざわざご足労いただいて申し訳ありません。
いえ。
Akiyuki restlessly eyed his surroundings.
おはようございます。
Yeah? Yeah? Ayame then joined us with documents in hand.
本日は鳴子さんが目撃した人物について検証させていただきます。
Was that the yarn they'd spun him? Made sense though. Probably wouldn't have come if they told him straight to his face that we found his testimony fishy.
はい。よろしくお願いします。
ではまず目撃時の状況ですが、こちらの車をその場所まで移動させますので。
Ayame then escorted Akiyuki over to the squad car he and Uozumi had driven in.
レジ、
Uozumi shuffled over to me once they were out of earshot.
鳴子昭之ってやつ。調べてみたら5年ほど前まで都内の雑誌社にいたそうだ。
雑誌社。
Ozumi nodded.
天罰の件も担当していたらしい。現場に来ていたのを覚えているやつが捜査官の中にもいた。
ってことはどんな状況だったのか知っている可能性も高いのか。
事件後に出版された雑誌に載っていた記事を書いたのもこいつだったようだ。
なるほどな。
I did recall there being an article like that in a magazine now that he mentioned it. Looking around, I find Akiyuki Naruko in the squad car at the footpath, explaining things to Ayumu. I'm just curious, if we actually check our evidence list, does it actually state that... Because I'm assuming this is what they're talking about, right? Okay, I was gonna say, if I actually stated his name, that'd be crazy. Like, oh yeah, it was... Like, he said he changed his surname, but it was like, it's Akiyuki so-and-so. I'd be like... The car was currently at the part where the road turned left, right where you could see the Spikenard pit at 12 o'clock.
この辺りを通っている時に正面に人の姿が見えて
Asuka was currently standing by the Spikenard pit as part of Akiyuki's recreation. Even I could tell it was him despite my shitty eyesight. The problem was that it was currently daytime.
ナルコさん、この方向で間違いないで。
I stressed that point once Akiyuki got out of the car.
ええ、うちの車とは車高も違いますがだいたいこの辺りでした。
Well, you see, buddy, that doesn't end up. There's road work. They close off the road. No, that doesn't add up.
ナルコさん、その時間は確か
Yeah, because isn't the road closed
21
between 8
時
and
頃
10?
でしたよね。
I'm pretty sure the road is closed between 8 and 10, bud.
ええ、この先にある知り合いの家へ行く途中だったので。
You see, it's not your whereabouts that we cared about, bud. Akiyuki pointed down the road.
その時間に間違いはありません。その知り合いの農家にも
So his
確認を
acquaintance is
取れ
in
てい
on
ま
it,
す
is what you're telling me. I leafed through her documents. Is there anything off about that statement? Oh, there sure is.
ナルコさん、あなたが21時頃にここを通ることはできないんですよ。
ですが
車のライトに照らされた犯人らしき男を見たというのでしょう。
And I could prove it too. Because of the motherfucking road work. Accessible via leaving the site only accessible via the opposite road from 8 to 10.
この道に入る幹線道路は当日の夜に工事をしていたんですよ。交差点付近が通行止めになっていたのは20時から22時。
Try again, bud.
つまりあなたが言う通りの向きにはならないんですよ。反対側から入ってきて折り返すなんて不自然なことをしない限りはね。
I pointed to the squad car Akiyuki had been driving up until a minute ago.
それは
Akiyuki looked back and forth up and down the road.
いや逆だ。帰る途中で見た。
I just slowly shook my head.
私が気にしているのは時間ではなく、あなたがこの道を通った時の方向なんですよ。
I pointed to the squad car and explained.
反対側から来た場合、どうあっても穴の位置に車のライトは届きませんから。
あ、そうですね。こちらからだと横を通り過ぎることになりますからね。
Ayumu nodded as she studied the road.
するってとどういうことになるんだ？
Means he fucking lied to us. Ozumi suddenly towered right behind Akiyuki.
どうにもならねえよ。
Put him in arm jail.
ただ証言に信憑性がなくなっただけさ。ただどうしてそんな嘘をついたのかはとても興味はありますがね。
Akiyuki Naruko clammed up as if realizing he'd just be digging himself deeper if he said another word.
もう少し詳しくお話を聞かせてもらえますかね。
Ozumi put a hand on Akiyuki's shoulder and led him off to the squad car. Akiyuki went along quietly, something that didn't sit quite right with me.
どうかしましたか？
Asuka must have noticed the subtle furrowing of my brow.
いや、どうも。
There's an issue here.
まだ何か気になることがあ
I
る
mean,
んで
to
す
be
か？
quite honest, Ayumu, there is a lot that bothers me. But this case specifically,
気になるって言えばそうなんだ。
this guy simply didn't strike me as the culprit. True. He lacked the sort of so-called aura you'd expect from a murderer. Bro's aura game is mad weak. He just doesn't have the aura to be a murderer, alright? Man's got that beta simp aura. Though it was merely my gut talking, it felt more like he'd been a puppet on someone's strings.
まさかな。
That was just crazy talk.
これからナルコさんのお宅へ行くのですが、先生はどうなさいますか？
だったらマサキを連れて行ってくれ。俺はあっちの聴取に付き合う。
了解しました。
まあ、あとこれは許可が下りたらでいいんだが、軽トラックの荷台の血液反応を調べておいてくれないか。
What's a luminol test? Oh, Google. Oh, Google. Luminol? Yes, what's a luminol test? Luminol test is a forensic technique that uses chemiluminescence to detect the presence of blood, even if it's invisible to the naked eye or has been cleaned up. Okay, okay. I don't think my FBI agent's gonna like the fact that I looked that up, but okay, okay.
死体を運んだという証拠ですね。
Mayhaps. Heh, that's my self-proclaimed assistant for you. Taught her everything she knows.
捜査令状が必要になるんじゃありませんか？
だから許可が下りたらと言ってるだろう。さっさと行ってこい。
Next stupid question. I gave Mosky a literal push on the back before heading to my car in order to follow Ozumi. Mosky and Ayame arrived at the Naruko
と
residence.
はいえ、まだナルコさんが犯人と決まったわけではないよね。
That's why we're investigating, stupid.
ええ。ですから捜査といってもまだ任意でしか行えません。何らかの自供が取れ次第連絡が来るはずですが、
Ayame glanced at the car's radio.
今は待機しかできませんね。
Mosky eyed his surroundings. He soon spotted a light blue mini truck in the barn. That must be the one Tokisaka once tested for blood. Not that he imagined there'd be any visible bloodstains left behind, of course. Unless Akiyuki Naruko was an absolute lunatic who had no qualms about what he was doing, he probably long since washed it. In any case, they couldn't check it even if they wanted to, not until they were issued a search warrant and forensics arrived, that was.
ナルコ秋雪は犯人なのでしょうか？
Ayama spoke while keeping her eyes trained on the Naruko residence.
犯人の疑いが強いのは確かだろうけれど、さっきの時坂さんの感じではそれだけではないような気がするね。
True.
彼が事件に関わっていたのは間違いないとして。
そうなのかもしれない。でも鳴子秋雪だって娘が行方不明になっているからね。
行方不明だということだって。
それだって可能性の一つでしかないよ。
Mosky interrupted Ayama.
今は行方不明であることが真実だと思わなければならないさ。
They assumed she was dead only to find out later that she really had simply been missing. They could end up making some grave mistakes, before that revelation came to light, ones they could never rectify.
そうですね。
もしも共犯者がいるとしたら。
His wife, Satoko. The odds of that were high, logistically speaking anyway. Mosky looked up at the main house with that thought in mind. He then strained his eyes after noticing something was off about the house. Namely, that a screen leading to the living room was wide
こ
open.
の時期に窓を開けている。
いえ、あれは。
Ayama fell silent as soon as she looked at the house, then abruptly raced out of the car.
佐藤さん。
It was only after Mosky frantically started chasing her that he noticed it too. The tatami mat visible through the gap in the living room was upturned, leaning against the screen as if it snagged on it.
中で何か起こった。
Mosky followed Ayama through the front door. It was an absolute disaster inside. Not only had the tatami mats and furniture been upturned and tossed aside, but the floors were littered with broken shards of china and glass.
ナルコさん。
Ayama hurried over to Satoko, the latter collapsed under a tatami mat. She's alive. However, she was unconscious and bleeding out of her forehead.
しっかりしてください。
落ち着いて。
Mosky grabbed Ayuma's shoulder and stopped her from dragging Satoko off the floor.
頭を打っているようだから動かさないように。急いで車に戻って応援と救急車を呼ぶんだ。
はい。
Ayama got to her feet and frantically bolted for the door. Mosky gave Satoko another good look before standing up and scanning the room once he'd concluded she wasn't in any immediate peril. When he did, he noticed some things about the scene that didn't sit well with him. Thus, Mosky decided to search the room in hopes of finding clues to the identity of Satoko's assailant and their motives. Oh, Mosky's investigating. Taking over the reins of the investigator, huh? Bread. Bread rolls were scattered across the floor for some reason. Husky picked up one of them to find that it was still a bit warm. So these are freshly baked then. Still, it seemed like an awful lot for a house of 2. Perhaps they were planning on giving some to the neighbors. Muskie considered putting their other rolls into the basket, but he left them alone after realizing they might serve as evidence of sorts. Floorboards beneath the tatami mats had been broken off. Muskie stuck his head through the gaps and found it too dark to see anything below. Fortunately, it didn't seem like anyone was hiding there, though. If that's the case, why would they pry off the floorboards? Were they checking to see if there was anything under them? Tatami mats had all been torn off and carelessly tossed around like a child making a mess out of their toys. Muskie checked the other rooms, only to find that the tatami mats had all suffered the same treatment. Did a burglar do all this? She was unconscious, yet still stable. However, moving her would probably do more harm than good. The broken shit. Desk. Objects that appear to have originally resided atop the nearby desk were scattered everywhere. They'd probably been knocked off by a carelessly tossed tatami mat. Broken plates were also strewn around. Muskie noticed a wallet full of bills sitting in the desk drawer. He reached for it, but stopped himself in the nick of time. I hadn't been planning on filching the bills or anything, but I just probably want to check those for fingerprints. Still, the fact that they hadn't been taken seemed to suggest the culprit hadn't even bothered with the wallet. Does that mean this wasn't a robbery then? Muskie approached the open screen. Apparently it had been dislodged after a tatami mat crashed into it. However, a look outside revealed no shoes nor footprints on the veranda. In other words, it didn't seem like the culprit had broken in through that way. But where then? Okay, what else can we click on here? The corners. Always gotta check the corners. Always gotta check the corners. Never know with the corners. I think that's it. Muskie heard several voices approaching the front door just as he'd figured he'd investigated enough.
まさきさん、応援が到着しました。
I wonder who it could be.
Oh,
Several police officers shuffled in and immediately checked on Satoko. Oh, it's just random police officers. Okay. Never mind. Muskie left the room so he wouldn't get in their way.
時坂さんたちは
Muskie turned to Ayumu once they were both outside.
時坂先生はまだ鳴子昭之の聴取中です。
Amber lamps. A compact van ambulance arrived on the scene just then, releasing medical professionals who hurried inside with a stretcher.
何があったかはまだ聞けそうにないね。
ええ。でも調べてみて何かわかりましたか？
You bet I did.
なんとなくは。まずは鳴子さんを襲った犯人の目的だけど。
Scene of the crime had suggested as much. They definitely were trying to do that.
おそらくこれは強盗目的じゃないかな。畳を剥がしたりして明らかに何かを探しているようだった。
They were definitely searching for something. They weren't trying to rob her either, but they definitely weren't trying to do the other thing.
ですが、財布には手をつけられた様子がありませんでした。
Well, they were trying to rob her of
強
something,
盗ならば
but not necessarily
まず
money.
そこを狙うと思うのですが。
If this were just basic thievery, maybe.
目的はお金じゃなく他のものだったんだろうね。ただそうなると犯人像がある程度絞り込めるかもしれない。
The culprit who assaulted Satoko Naruko was likely an acquaintance.
知り合いか近しい人物によ
Because
る
they
犯
were
行だろ
let
う
in.
ね。
Because there was no signs of forced entry. Oski proceeded to point out how not only were there no signs of a break-in at the veranda or anywhere, but there was nothing indicating that they'd left after trashing the room.
だから招かれて屋内に入ったからだと思う。
そうしてから鳴子さんを襲い気絶させた。
Ayumu nodded in agreement.
何を探していたのでしょうか？
それはなんだろうね。床下だけ集中的に調べているようだったから。
In that case, perhaps it was something large.
ちょっと今の情報だけではわからないね。
That was all you could tell her. Ozumi and I left Akiki Naruko's interrogation in the hands of another investigator and headed back to Chofu as soon as we heard there had been an incident at the Naruko residence.
じゃあ、鳴子聡子の命に別状はないんだな。詳しく話を聞きたいところだが、今は安静にして意識の回復に努めさせろ。
Ozumi was engaged in conversation over the radio with someone. If I were Satoko Naruko, I wouldn't know whether to be grateful or offended by the brand of compassion he just shown just now.
現場に行くぞ。
Ozumi got into the shotgun seat of my car.
無線のあるパトカーの方がいいんじゃないか。
I gestured to a squad car parked next to the police box.
そう離れてねえから必要ねえよ。しのごの言ってねえでとっとと出せ。
My poor suspension.
分かったよ。
Ozumi and I were passing the base of the small hill whose apex the Nautico is called home. But then, all of a sudden...
ん？止めてくれ、レイジ。
Oh.
なんだ？
そこに人が倒れてる。
Yusaku? Yasuku? Yep. Ozumi got out of the car. A moment later, I saw there was indeed someone sprawled across the ground outside a giant metal door built into the hill's slope. It appeared to be a man. However, I couldn't get a good look at him from my position. Wait, don't worry about that later. For all I know, he might be dead. Ozumi approached the man. First glance looked like he'd come out of that door and collapse. That was highly unlikely, seeing as said door was sealed tight.
おい、大丈夫か？
Ozumi called out to the man. However, the latter didn't move. Whatever his story, though, I could imagine it was unrelated to the break-in that happened just up the hill.
気を失ってるだけか。
Ozumi said that after giving the man a little jostle to the shoulder. He then sat up, turning his face my way.
優作か。
What's he doing here?
そのようだな。この扉に何かあるのか？
Ozumi looked up. Not only had the door's hinges and margins been welded shut, but it had even been sealed with metal bars. Furthermore, the door in question was marred with streaks of faded reddish brown here and there, and inflicted by the cruel passage of time. Yusuke must have been trying to do something to it, considering the plethora of rust caking his hands.
扉よりも先にこいつを何とかする方が先じゃないのか。
I'd have been lying if I said I wasn't curious about the door, but we couldn't just ignore Yusuke. Besides, still believed he had something to do with what had happened at the Nautico residence. Oh, he definitely did.
ったく。じゃあここは任せたぞ。
Ozumi handcuffed Yusuke and casually shouldered him as if he were a travel
い
case.
や、動かさない方がいいんじゃないか。
頭を打ったわけでもねえようだから心配するな。上のパトカーに放り込んで見張らせておく。
Ozumi marched right off without another word. Whatever, at least I'm not the one carrying him. Still, what the hell was he doing here? Turned back to face the metal door. It was clear from the rust that hadn't been open for a long, long time. Water seeped out of the smallest gaps at the very bottom, coating the concrete beneath it in a wet mantle. Where does this lead? Door made an odd sound when I knocked on it. More specifically, there was less of an echo than I expected. The state of the rust didn't give me the impression that the door was made from bulky metal plates. So in other words,
扉だけ。いや、埋められているのか。
for all I knew, maybe it once led to a warehouse or something. That wasn't out of the question, considering how this area neighbored Chofu Airfield, which had seen regular use during war. Therefore, once the war had ended, they deemed it served its purpose and had it sealed off with dirt, leaving only the door as proof it existed. It all sounded logical to me. Still didn't explain what Yusuke had been doing there.
地下室。
Wait, that reminds me.
時坂さん、
My train of thought was rudely interrupted by an approaching Masaki.
田村優作が倒れていたって。
ああ、ここにな。
He stepped back to make room for Masaki.
上から落ちたって。
Masaki must have been referring to the Nautico residence at the top of the hill.
魚住が見たところ怪我はないようだからそれはないだろう。
で、この扉は何ですか？
Masaki indicated the
俺
door,
が聞きたいよ。この真上は何がある？
pointed up the hill.
母屋の裏側くらいでしょうか。
Masaki knocked on the
開
door.
けられないんですか？
おそらく埋められてるな。お前ちょっとその辺を走ってきて。
自分がですか？
本当のことを話すとは限らんだろう。ほら、行ってこい。
あ、待ってくださいよ。上で調べたことをまとめたんで渡しておきます。
Masaki handed me a piece of paper.
ここに優作さんがいたってことは、上での犯行も彼。
いいから行ってこい。
I routed Masaki and left the door behind me. There's no point staying around if it wasn't going to budge, I figured. So instead, I decided to head to the Nautico residence and exchange information with the cops. I read through Masaki's report as I ascended the hill. I reached the top to find multiple squad cars surrounding the Naruko residence. Ozumi was already there, standing next to an
どう
ambulance.
だった
Decided to inquire about Yusuke Tamura's condition first.
これから搬送だ。疲労による失神じゃないかと言ってたが。
Perfect. Then we could question him about what he was doing down by that door once he woke up.
実中ハックナルコサトコを襲ったのだろう。
そう考えるのは想像に難くねえが、理由は何だ？
逆恨みじゃないのか。ナルコ家の娘に手を出して捕まってるんだからな。
The problem with that theory, though, was why he would have waited all these years.
魚住警部、
I had emerged from the main house just then.
おう、何か分かった。
やはり室内から盗まれたものなどはないようです。
何かあったって痕跡もなかったんだな。
はい、地下室のようなものも。
Underground rooms, huh? Stared down at the hardened earth. Feels about as unnatural as they get.
佐藤さん、地下室の入り口が見つからなかったということでいいんだね。
はい。
I blinked in confusion.
下にあった扉が入り口だってのか。
だろうな。おそらく田村優作はそれを探していたのだろう。
今、現状に残された指紋の照合をやらせている。正確な結果はまだだが、田村優作でほぼ間違いないそうだ。
地下には何があるんでしょうか。
金銀財宝がザックザクか。
Oh, wasn't me actually making a joke. But he's gonna start flying next?
そんなもんじゃないだろう。
Still, seemed like there had to be something under this house. Based on everything I'd learned so far, I figured it was probably... bomb shelter.
佐藤さん、以前この辺りの防空壕などの施設跡を調べたことがあったよね。
はい、地図ならここにあります。
I may retrieve the map in question from her
この
bag.
場所に何か書かれていないか。
ありました。陸軍の弾薬庫があったようです。
I may pointed at our current location on the map.
弾薬庫だ？そういうのはもっと飛行場の近くに作るんじゃねえのか。
Ozumi's gaze scrolled across the map to Chofu Airfield.
爆撃にあったら一発でお釈迦だろうが。
ですが、すでに埋められているそうです。
I may indicated a supplementary note that had been written on the map.
下にあった扉も錆びついていて塞がれていた。扉を叩いても反響音もしなかったから。
はあ、そうなると掘り返すしかねえか。
Ozumi kicked the ground.
何が埋まってるのかは田村優作に聞けばわかることだから、わざわざ掘る必要はないだろう。
素直に吐いてくれりゃいいんだがな。
It was then that Masaki finally
お
returned.
う、ご苦労。何かわかった？
ええ、この丘戦前は陸軍の弾薬庫だったそうですよ。
はあ、それはこっちでも調べがついた。
終戦間際の空襲で爆弾にやられたそうです。爆発はしなかったそうですが、ちょうど今母屋が建っているあたりが埋め立てたところだと近所の人は言ってました。
That meant that they really must have blocked off the door at the bottom of the hill, too, just as we suspected.
地下に何があるかは分かったが、なんだって田村優作はそこを掘ろうと思ったんだ。
He thought there was something in there. And he's right.
その弾薬庫に何かがあるって話を。
どこからそんなことを。いや、それを考えるのは後回しだな。今重要なのはこの下に何があるかだ。
何か手がかりになりそうなものは。
We do. We do. Alright. I know what you're thinking. Oh, but you're just answering this because you're looking at the guide, but hear me out. It makes perfect sense. Something underground. It was used with the airfield, right? It was used in coordinates with the airfield, so it only makes sense. The bug leg that is found in underground spaces with dirt and whatnot, right? There's dirt up against that door. So something's being kept there here that's where the fucking bugs are at. Because this was part of the Americans' munition stash. It's the bugs, baby. It's all about the bugs.
発見された遺体に付着していたものですね。
前にも一度考察したが、最初の死体についていたオケラの足と。
するってと、この下に仏があったっていうのか。
That's the assumption. Ozumi stomped on the ground.
ナルコ秋行の態度から見てもその可能性は高いだろう。米軍施設が近いことからも 北米原産のオケラがいてもおかしくはない。
仏の爪に詰まっていた土も埋め立てに使ったものであれば納得。
遺体の状況が異なる点は説明できますか？
そうだな。さっき下の扉の隙間から水が漏れ出していた。
We need a proper investigation to be sure, though.
ここに死体があったとしてどこから出したんですか？
どこかに入り口があるんだろうさ。
Couldn't see any other possibility.
爆撃にあって埋め立てたところに家を建てたのであれば、床下をいくら調べたって。
この敷地のどこかに。
Muskie scanned the area.
やっぱり下にあった扉をこじ開けた方が早いんじゃねえか？
いや、あれは長い間使われた痕跡がなかった。
たく捜査員を総動員するか。
Rosemary hurried over to a squad
で
car.
もどうして死体を外に出したんでしょうか？
Muskie started thinking aloud.
そうですね。隠し場所としては最適だと思いますが。
Naima looked up at me.
そうだな。腐敗臭がひどくなった。
やはり天罰の打天使を作るのが理由だった。
だとしたら、うど穴に捨てられていた死体の意味がなくなる。
腐ってしまって加工には適さなかったのではありませんか？
それでも息する理由にはならない。そのせいで足がついたのか。
I can only imagine they had to get rid of it for some reason. But why? What did I have that could point to it? Now, see, this is a leap of logic I wouldn't be able to make myself. I'll admit to that fully. Fresh bread. Now, obviously, the fresh bread's being used to feed the kids they keep hostage. Why are they moving the bodies? I'm guessing to keep the other one. I don't know, so the kids don't start eating the bodies? Fuck, I don't know. Recall the spread of bread rolls Muskie reported finding in the Naruko's house. Why did they make so many to begin with? To feed the girls they were keeping prisoner. If they're keeping those girls prisoner under the house, then everything adds up. The two victims had probably been held there before they died, too. Which also explained that what Yusuke Tama had been doing here, too. Probably figured the same thing out and come to save his niece. With both the Nauticos in custody, the girls' lives were in danger. That bread had all but surely been their only lifeline. It was then that Uzumi returned with a squad of officers in tow.
よし、探せ。
Cops dispersed across the property at Uzumi's command. Decided to pitch in two, even though a squad this size would probably find our target quickly. Now, if I were an entrance leading underground, where would I be? Oh, I actually get to click on the map. We're in the main house. We're in the rear. We're in the barn. We're in the front yard. Driveway question mark? Or inside the barn, maybe. There was currently a mini truck parked there. You know, the ground appeared to be made of concrete. Yeah, wow. I just noticed the tarp under the truck. I guess maybe that doesn't show in the far away shot, but I went inside curious to see if I was onto something. Yeah, that's right. If you're ever gonna look into the truck before all the craziness went down. Examine the truck's bed only to find nothing within. Except some dirt piled up in the corners, that is. And again, for all I knew, analyzing that could very well turn up something. It was then that I noticed plywood spread out like a carpet beneath me, under the truck's tires to be exact. That sort of thing normally wouldn't have caught my eye, but given the circumstances.
Masaki, ちょっと来てくれ。
Called the Muskie as I donned a pair of cotton gloves.
何か見つかりましたか？
車を動かすから後ろから押してくれ。
I took a look into the car through the open window. Seats were bench style, so it wasn't between them. Furthermore, I didn't see any levers under the dashboard or anything.
このトラックは運転席のドア側にありますよ。
Check where Matsuki indicated and indeed found a lever there.
なんでそんなこと知ってるんだよ。
仕事でたまに使いますから。あ、変速も右側のレバーですからね。
わかったよ。
Shifted the gear into neutral and unlocked the
よ
handbrake.
しいいぞ。
Matsuki and I slowly pushed the truck forward. We stopped once it was off the plywood. With that done, I applied the handbrake again while Matsuki quickly dragged the wood away.
マンホールが出てきました。
当たりだな。
Ozumi and his cops convened at the barn shortly thereafter.